Hello, thank you for joining us today for Iris's Prep Talk featuring NCIL, the National Center on Improving Literacy. These sessions are designed to introduce teacher education faculty to resources developed by the OSEP-funded national centers. Today, you'll learn about some important resources from the National Center on Improving Literacy. I am Sarah Simone, the IRIS Center's Technical Assistance Coordinator, and the IRIS Center's Project Director, Naomi Tyler, is with us today as well. She and I will be monitoring the chat in case you have any questions or issues. Please note that the session is being recorded for those who are unable to attend live. And we would love to encourage you to keep your cameras on, especially during the breaks between discussion of resources when we will have some discussion. And during the session, the presenter will share one resource at a time, followed by that brief Q&A where you're welcome to keep your camera on after each of the resources. And if you have questions during the presentation, please drop them into the chat or send a direct message to Naomi or me. And then at 1:30, we will wrap up and share some information, and then we'll keep the Zoom open after that for more informal discussion. So now I'm really excited to introduce Dr. Sarah Seiko, the Deputy Director of the National Center on Improving Literacy. Dr. Seiko will be sharing resources related to improving outcomes for students with literacy-related disabilities, including dyslexia. So here you go.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We're really excited to be here. As Sarah said, my name is Sarah Seiko. I do want to acknowledge my colleague, Kristen Kane, who is also participating in this event. We wanted to start with sharing a little bit of background information on who we are, for those of you who may not be as familiar with us. So it's basically our origin story here. We were established in the fall of 2016 through the Every Student Succeeds Act, or ESSA, and we are jointly administered by the Office of Special Education Programs and the Office of Elementary and Secondary Education at the U.S. Department of Education. We are made up of several organizations. We're led by Boston University, Wheelock College of Education and Human Development. And our partners are the Center on Teaching and Learning at the University of Oregon, the Florida Center for Reading Research at FSU, and RMC Research Corporation. Here's a slide with our mission. So we're focused on increasing access to and use of evidence-based approaches to screen, identify, and teach pre-K through grade 12 students with literacy-related disabilities, including dyslexia. We have 5 key priority areas that you see listed below the mission. And I hope that you noticed one trend, one commonality among all of the priority areas in our mission is a focus on evidence-based practices and approaches. So with regard to the first priority area, that's developing or identifying assessment and screening tools. Our second priority area is focused on instruction and intervention. Our third priority area revolves around providing families with that information from priority stream 1 and 2, so they can better advocate and support their child's literacy needs. Our priority area 4 is our targeted technical assistance and professional development work. And our fifth and final priority is focused on our dissemination of products and services. So here's a snapshot of our website, improvingliteracy.org. So I do encourage you after today to go to our website and explore the various resources that we have available. Everything that we have is available to you free of charge to use as a federally funded center. And we encourage you to use those resources in your coursework with your pre-service teachers and share them with other interested parties. And we're going to be going over today some highlight resources that we want to share with you for consideration in your coursework and preparation programs. We want to start with a poll question. Simply to start, how familiar are you with the ENSIL? So take a minute to answer this question in the poll and hit submit. You're able to post the results? Okay, great. So there's a variety of familiarity among the attendees today. Most of you, 44%, are unfamiliar. So that's great. I'm happy that you'll have this opportunity to learn a little bit more about the center and a couple of key resources that we are going to showcase for you today. So the first resource that I want to overview is our implementation toolkit on supporting students with dyslexia. This is a screenshot of what that toolkit looks like on our website. And all of the toolkits that I'm going to highlight today are available from our menu at the top of our website called Tools and Resources. If you click on the drop-down menu, Tools and Resources, you can get to these 3 toolkits by clicking Implementation Toolkits and locating each one. So the reason why we selected this particular toolkit to share with you today is because we know that most states now have some form of dyslexia laws that are in place. And there are lots of provisions within those dyslexia laws that discuss what dyslexia is and how teachers may need to engage and support with students with dyslexia or showing characteristics of dyslexia. And as an educator preparation program, there may be a need to be thinking about the degree to which your programs or courseworks address the topic of dyslexia and understanding dyslexia for pre-service candidates. So this particular implementation toolkit may be a nice enhancement to thinking about your coursework on supporting students with reading difficulties, thinking about your coursework that has to do with understanding various reading profiles and reading differences among children. And it's set up in a couple of key ways that I want to orient you to. First of all the toolkits that we're going to review today are online implementation toolkits. So they do reside on our website. They're very comprehensive, which means they will have everything you need in terms of content that you can access and in a multimedia format. So we have things like videos, we have PDF documents that can be downloaded, we have tools, and we have streaming tutorials. Most of our implementation toolkits include not only ENSIL developed products or resources, but also resources that we've curated from other reputable sources that are addressing the targeted topical area, in this case, supporting students with dyslexia. And in this particular toolkit, it will explain for the user or individual what dyslexia is, how you screen students for dyslexia risk, how to use data to identify supports for students with dyslexia, and what an effective reading instruction looks like and how you might intensify that reading instruction for students with dyslexia. So if you're thinking a little bit about the types of professional standards that are available to guide educator preparation coursework. One source for those standards are the International Dyslexia Association's Knowledge and Practice Standards, their most recent version in 2018. So the information on supporting students with dyslexia that you'll find in this implementation toolkit aligns well with the IDA KPS Standard 2, focused on knowledge of diverse reading profiles, including dyslexia, and their coursework expectations around that particular standard area. So I want to talk a little bit more about how the content of this implementation toolkit might be used in some coursework. So on this slide, you'll see some examples of key ideas for course application. So specifically, when we're talking about accessing candidates, pre-service candidates' prior knowledge, we can think about having them write about what they know about the topic of dyslexia and have them use their written notes, for example, to debrief as a class or in small groups, and to have them update those notes as they experience, for example, the tutorial that's embedded within this particular implementation toolkit to build on or clarify their understanding of dyslexia. So the toolkit, the tutorial itself is self-study streaming from our website. So you can, for example, have pre-service candidates view that tutorial on their own as part of an assignment, and then come to class prepared to discuss what they learned. Similarly, aspects of that tutorial can be shown during class time as a prompt for in-class discussion. And if you do assign the tutorial to view, users can come back to that tutorial. They don't have to view it all in one sitting. It saves their place. Likewise, you can choose to divide that tutorial up into smaller, more short experiences to use on targeted topics addressed in the toolkit itself. Thinking about moving into new learning opportunities, pre-service candidates can identify elements of the tutorials that confirm or contradict what they already knew about teaching and supporting students with dyslexia. Or in small groups, you can ask your students to demonstrate how to teach foundational reading skills to students with dyslexia and discuss what seems easier or more difficult depending on the skills to be taught. And then finally, thinking about the area of comparing newly learned strategies to observed practices, they might want to identify examples of observed practices that focus on explicating teaching students with dyslexia foundational reading skills, maybe through their practicum experiences, for example, and describe how those observed practices in their practicum are similar or different from those practices that are reflected in the tutorials. And lastly, just reflecting on their own practice and what they describe, what they might do differently in their future classroom to build foundational reading skills for students with dyslexia. And if they haven't had an opportunity to observe instruction on foundational reading skills with students with dyslexia in their practicum, you can ask them to explain how they might incorporate the practices for students with dyslexia in developing these skills. So I am going to pause there and stop sharing. I know I overviewed a lot, but I do want to have an opportunity to take some questions or reflections around that supporting students with dyslexia toolkit that you might have.
one question that has come up, and while people are typing in, I'll share this question that's come up is, does the NCIL have any resources that future teachers can use in their practicum experiences, like web lesson plans or web tools?
That's a great question. Thank you. And I thank you, Naomi, for pointing out that my audio is sounding a little funny. So I'll try to speak up. We actually have a brand new toolkit or resource released on intensifying instruction. And in that particular implementation toolkit, there are actual lessons that teachers can use. And in your case, pre-service candidates could use in their practicum experience when working in small groups or working with students with reading difficulties or reading disabilities. And any of our implementation toolkits and resources can again be adapted and customized to your particular setting, meaning you can take aspects of them, as I mentioned, and break them down. For example, in our supporting students with dyslexia toolkit, we have five toolkits that reside within it, each focused on a different aspect of supporting students with dyslexia. So it includes some video clips that you can show in class as a prompt for discussion. And it also includes in that supporting students with dyslexia toolkit almost case studies, in the sense that they create little student profiles that exemplify what a student with dyslexia might be experiencing, and then talk about how teachers can support that particular child. So again, you could break that tutorial up and maybe track that little student case that's provided in that tutorial as a prompt for discussion on what your pre-service candidates may do the same or differently than what they're seeing, and what might be happening in their field experiences that may be the same or different.
Thank you. Okay, there are two other questions. The first one is, so this toolkit is designed to be a form of professional development opportunities for teachers. Can anyone facilitate this?
Absolutely. Anyone can facilitate it. So this is available to, it's the supporting students with dyslexia toolkit was designed with educators in mind. So it both in service and pre-service. However, we feel like it is applicable to a general audience too. So it certainly has utilities in different settings. And we will be highlighting in the next resource that will go over an actual guide that will help facilitators who might be interested in presenting this content to pre-service or in-service teachers, and it provides that guidance for you to do so.
Okay. I think we'll save the next question for after for in-depth discussion, and let you go on to the next resource.
Okay, great. I'll go ahead and do that.
Just in the interest of time.
Okay, great. So the next resource I want to highlight is again in this online implementation toolkit format. This is our Families in Schools Partnering for Children's Literacy Success Toolkit. The reason why we focused on this toolkit again is because oftentimes EPP programs are looking for ways to enhance the family engagement aspect of their coursework. And so this could be a nice resource for you to select and use in your coursework and integrate into your existing courses. It aligns with the IDA Knowledge and Practice Standard 3 around assessment, where it talks about course expectations for teachers being able to communicate educational assessment data findings to parents in ways that are understandable. So that's addressed within this particular implementation toolkit. And it also aligns to competencies within the NAFSCE, or the National Association for Family School Community Engagement, around family engagement practices in higher ed coursework. So similar to
what I was overviewing for the Supporting Students with Dyslexia toolkit, you can use and unpack this toolkit in similar ways in your coursework. So thinking about ways to access pre-service candidates' knowledge about effective family engagement practices, in particular for literacy. So that's why we think this toolkit is especially useful, because it contextualizes family engagement for literacy learning specifically. The opportunity is to think about how it might move into and develop new learning for pre-service candidates via comparing their known family engagement practices to new practices, having them demonstrate how to effectively engage with families in literacy learning, which is explained within the toolkit, and what aspects of family engagement for literacy learning might seem easier or difficult, depending on the student or the particular situation. And then likewise with comparing newly learned strategies to observed practices. So I'll stop there and see around our toolkit for families and schools partnering for literacy success. You'll notice that the tutorial itself, that multimedia tutorial embedded in that toolkit, has a school track and has a family track, and they have complementary information in it. So I would imagine in your context, you might be focused on the school track for the family engagement piece of it, and it supports pre-service educators learning about how effective family engagement practices for literacy might emerge within a school-wide system of support for students. Questions, comments?
While everybody's thinking of one, one was in the chat to me. Does NCIL have any resources or recommendations for promoting school partnerships with non-traditional families, such as grandparents, migrant families, foster caregivers, and group home staff?
That's a great question. So we do think of families broadly and inclusive of all of those groups that were just mentioned. So embedded throughout that family and schools partnering for children's literacy success is an emphasis on equitable family engagement practices, as well as thinking about more broadly about the conception of families. I can't say that we've designed anything specific to those particular family configurations, but we do try to not just solely focus on the role of the parent in terms of and focusing more on adult caregivers.
And another one is about what other issues do children with dyslexia experience, and how should those be handled by pre-service teachers?
Yeah, so that's a great question. In our Supporting Students with Dyslexia toolkit, we talk about some comorbidity with other types of learning disabilities, as well as impact on social and emotional well-being. So all of that comes up in terms of thinking about the complexities that need to be addressed in terms of supporting students with dyslexia, thinking of beyond just the academic side, but the behavioral side as well.
Great. All right, I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat, so.
Okay, great. I'll move on to our final toolkit that we wanted to highlight for you today. And that toolkit is our Understanding Screening toolkit. So similarly to why we selected Supporting Students with Dyslexia, we chose this one to highlight for a similar reason, in the sense that since many states now have adopted dyslexia laws, many of those dyslexia laws have provisions in them around screening, universal screening practices. Not only do those provisions appear in dyslexia laws, but they also appear in reading legislation writ large within states, that you'll also see universal screening provisions appear. So thinking about how your pre-service candidates are going into schools and districts where universal screening is going to be or is an expectation, to make sure that they understand what universal screening is all about and what the purpose of it is, how you might select a rigorous screening tool, best practices for universal screening, and what you do with the data from universal screening. All is discussed within this particular toolkit on universal screening. So again, it has all the aspects in it that you would see in our other online implementation toolkits. And we encourage you to introduce different pieces of the toolkit to your students over time and use them as opportunities to spark discussion on some of the information that's shared within the implementation toolkit, to engage in some of the to listen, for example, to some of the Ask the Expert video clips that we have and use that as a prompt for a discussion, or to share some of the resources that we have from other organizations that align with the topic, as a way to practice some of these practices or apply some of these practices in their practical experience. So I do want to mention before I open it up to general questions and comments that we did offer a Reading the Room event this past November on preparing pre-service candidates to teach reading. We have a Reading the Room discussion series that we offer quarterly. We have different panelists that participate, expert panelists that participate. In this case, you can access a recording of this webinar on the improvingliteracy.org website under videos. And you'll see here that we had 3 higher ed participants, and the event was moderated by Dean David Shard from BU Wheelock. It also has, in addition to the recording, resources that our panelists mentioned to our viewers during the course of the event, as well as some other resources that we've curated on the topic of preparing pre-service teachers to teach reading. Before I stop sharing my screen, I just wanted to put up again our website, link our Twitter and Facebook and YouTube connections for you to see there, so you can keep up, you can stay up to date on ENSL resources and activities, hear about new products that are coming out that might be useful to you and your students. Questions, comments?
Well, we could maybe go back to that one question from the, let's see, it was whether the interventions on the website for students, if you have interventions on the website for students in high school in either co-taught or resource classrooms.
So we don't have specific interventions per se. So as at ENSL, as a federally funded center, we don't endorse or provide information on specific programs or curricula, but we provide information about what constitutes high quality interventions and curricula, information on effective teaching principles that teachers can employ and learn. And we also provide information or access to databases and information such as NCII, the National Center on Intensive Intervention, has an academic screening and academic tools chart on interventions where they've evaluated different intervention programs, and anyone can really go to those sites to see how those interventions performed or analyzed based on various characteristics. But to answer about secondary ed, so our charge is up through grade 12. So we've spent a lot of time focused in the pre-K to grade 3 space, because that's where we have the most amount of rigorous research evidence around best practices at that age, but we are and do include information on providing interventions for older students and supporting students with literacy needs in the secondary level.
Wonderful. So I'm going to interject right here and just wrap up with a few comments, and then we'll keep going for the informal discussion and turn off the recording. So we will be keeping the Zoom on for another 30 minutes to continue, as I said, but in the chat, we will also be uploading a handout with the links to all of the NCIL resources that Dr. Seiko discussed today. And there will also be some links on that handout to IRIS modules that are related as well. And we hope you'll use all these resources in your courses and reach out to NCIL and us here at the IRIS Center if you want to learn more or have questions. We are also going to provide a link in the chat to all of the OSEP funded national centers if you'd like to explore those more. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off the recording now and welcome everybody to stay on and stick around and have some further discussion with Dr. Seiko.